Well, last week's reading ended on a particularly troubling note. Not only is Jesus going to be betrayed, but he's told the disciples, it's going to be one of you that betrays me. Here's how the disciples respond. We're in Luke chapter 22, verse 24. There arose a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them are called benefactors. It's not this way with you. The one who's the greatest among you must become like the youngest, and the leader like the servant. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? It's not the one who reclines at the table, but I am among you as one who serves. You are those who stood by me in my trials. Just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I grant you that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on the thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. But I've prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And then, once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. But he said to him, Lord, with you I'm ready to go to both prison and to death. And Jesus said, I say to you, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied 3 times that you know me. And Jesus said to them, when I sent you out with money, belt, and bag, and sandals, you did not lack anything, did you? They said, no, nothing. So Jesus said to them, but now whoever has a money belt is to take it along, likewise also a bag, and whoever has no sword is to sell his coat and buy one. For I tell you, that which is written must be fulfilled in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors. For that which refers to me has its fulfillment. And the disciples said, look, here are 2 swords. And Jesus said to them, it's enough. If there's an application that I think you should see in this passage, it's being careful about how quickly you respond. Notice how the disciples respond to the news of the fact that one of them is going to betray Jesus. At first, there's that discussion. They began to discuss among themselves which one of them it might be who was going to do this thing. But how quickly they move from, well, here's this worst possible thing that could happen. Which one of us is the worst? And the next discussion they have is, okay, well, if one of us is the worst, which one of us is the greatest? Timing is definitely not the greatest. So they enter into this discussion about who's the greatest, and Jesus says, you guys are missing the point. And in fact, you want to talk about who you're going to be as individuals and how you're going to respond to these times. He said, let me give you an example. Simon, Satan's demanded permission to sift you like wheat. And then he says, I've prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And this ties into this past week's sermon about faith and how long it lasts, and great faith and little faith and all those sorts of things. So he says, I pray that your faith may not fail. But once you have what? Once you've turned again. So there's even this idea that it is going to fail. But also think that the prayer of Jesus is probably effective. So in the long run, the duration of it all, Peter's faith doesn't fail. Even though he denies Christ, he has a chance for forgiveness and fulfillment of his role. And then we end this passage with Jesus saying, hey, I've told you about money belts and bags and swords and all those sorts of things. And he gives this statement really to indicate the times are changing. Everything is shifted. And we're going to head towards troubling times now. And so that whole reference of the sword, meaning these days of peaceful existence for us, is over. And so they take it quite literally, and they jump to the conclusion, okay, well, Lord, here's 2 swords right there. Jesus says, listen, enough. Enough. So sometimes, whether it's the words of Christ or when we're thinking about our circumstances, our initial reactions aren't always the best ones. Whether it's Jesus saying, hey, here's what's going to happen, and so they're distracted by saying, okay, well, what about us? Or Jesus saying, well, here's what's going to happen, and they jump on, again, really an idea, well, what about us? We'll take up these swords, and we'll fight for your Lord, instead of stopping and saying, okay, what is it that the Lord is actually saying? And how should I respond to these things? Our gut reactions, our first reactions in a fallen world aren't always the best. However, we can train ourselves to have better reactions, and the only way you're going to do that is through the power of the Holy Spirit, and he enables us through the word that he has given us. So, in order to have better reactions, and at least a better way to judge whether our reactions are in line with what God would want us to do, well, the way to do that is to keep reading.